I love it. I love the energy. So we're in for a real treat. How's everyone doing on AOL in here? So I'm excited to bring you guys the Carpenters. They have been called the hottest young classical musicians in the world by some of the critics. And just to let you know, I cannot remember classical musicians ever being called hot. So just to give you an example of I think the kind of special group that we have here, I've had the chance to know them for a few years, and they are really doing amazing things to revolutionize classical music, to bring it to new audiences, and they're doing all this other stuff. They're entrepreneurs. They're building a classical music instrument industry, and we're going to have a lot of fun. And then, of course, they're going to perform, and you're going to be in for a real treat. This is not your grandmother's classical music performance, I like to say. So Sean is the oldest of the siblings, so I'm going to ask you first, Sean. First, you started playing at 5 years old in the Suzuki Method, which I don't know what that is because I'm not a musician. It just sounds really badass. But how did you get in? How did you first start performing at 5? And what is the Suzuki Method?
Thanks so much, Tim, for the great warm introduction and the disclaimer about our, the type of music we play. So, like Tim mentioned, we try to keep it very current and very exciting music. We love playing, the master works of, Mozart and Beethoven, but as well as more contemporary works that are kind of part of our popular culture in many ways. So yeah, in terms of our start, the beginnings of playing, we started on the Suzuki Method, which was mainly, it was kind of, you do things by ear. So you hear, they would have many cassettes, and each book, they would have like volume 1 or volume 2. It's almost like a game, to get to the next level.
I was just picturing you blindfolded while you were doing this. Learning by ear.
So
it was 6 years old.
That was when you were 6 years old.
It was like 6. So in many ways, I mean, when I was growing up, I loved playing video games as well, but violins were also very much, playing the Suzuki Method was very much like that in terms of you're getting to, book 6 or book 7. But each piece you played, you basically would listen to a cassette and try to emulate the music. So you would learn, you would learn to read music by listening to it first. So eventually you get to a point where you start to understand what each note meant, and the time, the note, the time signature, the pitch, but. It would. So
basically, it was a very boring process until you were about 11 or 13. 11 to 13
and we were actually arguing.
Exactly.
Grace is here, the mother. We were arguing about how he started with it, Sean's idea, or was it the mom's idea? And they were disagreeing. Sean was saying it was the mom's idea. The mom was saying it was Sean's. But how did you guys get involved? Because you guys have done a lot of stuff as siblings since you were 5, sort of following and doing things together. So. Middle sibling here. How did you guys get involved when Sean was started?
So I actually gravitated more towards the cello, which is kind of ironic because I was the smallest of the 3 of us. And I requested that to be my instrument of choice, but my mom, as a single mom, she had to carry 3 babies, 2 violin cases, and a cello case. It was logistically impossible. So I got stuck with the hand-me-downs.
Quite the picture there.
And then, David, how did you start?
So
was this your idea, or was it just...
Definitely not. I was just following the lead because I was the youngest one and just following my brother and sister anywhere they went. So I'd just be like the tag-along, so whatever they did, I had to do as well. So basically when they were picking up the violin, I, of course, had to pick up the violin and want to play it. So I think, luckily, as the years progressed, we got better and better, and then we went to music conservatories, and then we got really serious about it. Although having more academic and sports were pretty much the primary interests, and then it kind of gravitated up until I guess 15, 16 years old when we went to Juilliard and School of Music. And then it got really serious, so we couldn't play any more tennis because we had to protect our hands, or we couldn't play basketball anymore. So it became, we basically had to, it was a give and take of basically our childhood memories of just going into sports, or we had to go into music.
Is there a competitiveness with siblings doing the same thing, or was that an asset to you guys, or were you all competing?
I was about to bring that up. I think my mom's it's kind of antithetical to how parents probably perceive it, but my mom's way of preventing against sibling rivalry was actually...
Mom's right there, by the way, hiding herself. We're talking about mom's parenting.
her method, there's method to her madness. Her method of parenting was basically to put all of us in to the same exact activities, same programs, all together, and that actually made us support each other instead of compete against each other. So
And it's hard to compete against me, so sorry about that, guys.
he takes the modesty award in our family.
And you guys have really, I like to call it the Carpenter way. They take classical things like classical music and they've put really modern spins on it. So even when we came out for sound check earlier, they had chairs up for your performance and they were immediately like, we don't sit like, when you see later when they're going to perform, they're going to be standing and moving. How did that develop? Like, I imagine when you go into classical music, there's probably a lot of tradition there and things that maybe it's a faux pas to stand when you're performing. How did you start to be creative around what you were doing with your music? Because I think if you look online, you'll see the kind of creativity they've really brought to classical music.
Yeah, so that's thanks. And we started first with other orchestras, so we would get into larger orchestras in Juilliard when we went to pre-college, and as well as the New York Youth Symphony. There's another really large organization. But we decided really about 5 years ago that we wanted to create our own chamber orchestra, and I think that it's very funny that was the same year that we decided to also create our company. And in many ways, they're very, very similar. When you're creating your own company, when you're an entrepreneur, you basically have the full reign on what exactly you want to do. Whatever you put into, you get out of.
You make the rules, basically.
Yeah, you make the rules. So, and this was right after, the major credit crisis and the, Second Depression, basically in 2008, end of 2008. That we decided to really create our own company, and a lot of there's an incredible amount of talent that was looking to do new ventures and new groups, new orchestras. So it was an ideal time to really start this, and right now a lot of either the current members or the alumni of the orchestra, they have positions at major orchestras in New York Philharmonic, Philadelphia. Pittsburgh Symphony. So yeah, I mean, it in many ways.
I think in general we aim to show that playing music or playing the violin, viola is a very, very physical activity. It's almost an athletic endeavor. I mean, not as much as being an Olympic fencer, but I mean, it takes.
I could not do what you guys do, by the way, at all.
We'll give you one of our bows. You can use it as
We're going to be fencing later on with
Yes.
the bows. So, make it a little bit more interesting.
Exactly to Lauren's point there. It's an unnatural position holding a violin, which weighs a certain amount of.
So, yeah, just to hold this up for many.
You're going
hours,
against
so
gravity, basically. You're going against gravity, and you just have to, not, exert too much force and energy.
It's good weight training, though.
It's great.
But you want to make it. I think the more physical it is as a performer, the more people are engaged, and the more they kind of interact with you as a performer. And so our goal is to not make it a kind of a one-way dialogue with the audience. It's to make it interactive. I mean, just as the way internet has kind of changed the dialogue between how we interact as people, we aim to have that two-way dialogue between the performer and the audience, and kind of tear down the barrier, tear down the wall and the formality between someone who's standing on a stage and someone who's there listening. So that was kind of the genesis of Salome. Just have an orchestra that was young, attractive, very physical in their performance, but doing it at the highest level. So we got the best conservatory students, the best kind of Ivy League students, and kind of put our talents together.
And they're very humble. They performed with John Legend, Natasha Bettenfield. They have been all over the world performing. So obviously the Salome Chamber, and for a lot of foundations as well. It's one of the things I love about you guys is they are willing to perform for nonprofits and really help them raise funds using classical music. So you guys have been just doing such an amazing job using classical music as a tool. Exactly. Now I also want to ask you guys, we introduced you all, but we didn't introduce your violas and violins. And these are the oldest things in this building, I'm going to guess, are the instruments you guys are holding. Will you tell us a little bit about your instruments and the importance of the instruments, and then we'll talk a little about the the whole market on instruments
Yeah,
has been
absolutely.
growing.
So first off, we have my viola, my primary viola. It was made in Venice in 1766, and it's one of the most well-preserved viola probably in the world. I'm very, very blessed to be playing on it and to have it as my primary instrument. And this instrument it's actually a few weeks ago, I was just in Venice, and it's almost its 250th anniversary this year. So I got to take a nice picture very close to San Marco with it, not outside, indoors, of course, but it really is one of the great violas and perfect size. It's 16 1/4, which is what you look for in with a viola, and just to know that this viola is in practically perfect condition, and as if it was presented by Michel Deconné to me, but this is 250 years later. So I think just the history behind these instruments and what they've gone through. I mean, just to think of how many wars they've gone through, and the modes of transportation. They didn't have airplanes in the 1700s, or even cars, and
Or
they
air
were
conditioning or heating.
yeah, I mean, so just to think of the horse-drawn carriages that they would have taken from one concert to another to be playing on this, and also the fact that of just the history it's gone through. I mean, it really is an incredible story, and we have 2 Stradivari's over here as well.
Exactly. So I'm holding a Antonio Stradivari. He was kind of the pioneer of violin making and musical instrument making it from 1644 to 1737. This violin was actually made in the 1600s, 1691, and it's an exceptionally beautiful and well kept instrument. It went through, over 320 years of history, being owned by royalty, being owned by industrialists, and you'll hear it in shortly. But it sounds incredible, better than anything that any modern contemporary makers can create today, using all the technology that
Modern
we have.
makers are not going to be very happy about that.
We're talking trash to you, violin makers of today.
Sorry about that.
A good point there is that they aspire. Well, all of the greatest modern contemporary violins made today are basically based on these models.
So basically, when they have all these tests about instruments, about modern makers and the sounds of Stradivari's compared to modern instruments, and they had blindfold tests, and they figure out, some of the instruments of the modern makers sound better than the Stradivari's, some Strads sound better. My retort is always that those instruments are copies of Stradivari. So without Stradivari's mold and actual instrument, there won't be any modern copies of those. It's basically like looking at a Da Vinci painting or a Rembrandt, or you can make the greatest copy of all time, but it will never be the origination of it. And I think for a lot of people, we can't really compare modern instruments and the old masters, because without the old masters, modern makers would have no template of what to make their instruments on. So I think it's basically it's very difficult also to quantify also the value of these instruments.
And what is the value of the instruments,
So,
generally speaking?
obviously, Stradivari's kind of start in the $4 or $5 million range, and the values could go up. This year I was at Sotheby's. They had the $45 million McDonald Stradivari's.
So let me just say, so Sotheby's this year was auctioning Viola with the starting price of $45 million. And David it was your idea, I think, as well, was sort of like,
To be the ambassador.
how would you like me to be the ambassador? So David was traveling around the world performing on this viola valued at $45 million. He gave me this earlier, and I was afraid to break it. First of all, how did that sort of come about, and how scared were you performing with a $45 million viola of damaging it?
I think after we've been playing since we were 4 or 5 years old, and these instruments have really become an extension of our bodies, and it's almost like you with a fencing. If you took a sword and it was a saber and basically it was worth, it was a priceless one owned by Napoleon, or there's one he fenced with and it was worth $20+ million, you would still look at it as a tool. So like for me, it was just looking at it as basically my other instrument or another viola that I would be playing on, and I don't think you could really quantify it as saying, well, this is one of 10, and if this gets broken or in any way damaged, then there will only be 9 left in museums. But I didn't really think of that. I mean, just you kind of just. You
treat even a lesser, quote unquote, expensive instrument with the same amount of respect and care as something that is really priceless, like that viola. This violin here as well. These are both made in the 1690s. This is a 1694 Stradivari violin, And 1690 is actually a very important year because that's when he was commissioning for the Grand Duke of Tuscany, the Medici family, a whole quartet of instruments. And those instruments right now are in the Accademia in Florence. So if you ever go to Florence, you'll see the whole quartet that he commissioned there. So yeah, he was obviously in his day a very important maker, but we are just beyond blessed and privileged to be able to play on these, for our company to represent owners.
You guys have sort of become ambassadors for the instruments themselves. So these guys sell the violins, but you have a sort of, I mentioned earlier, the Carpenter way, but you have a very unique sort of angle to the way that you do this. Maybe we could talk a little about that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think what distinguishes ourselves is we want to bring this market, we bring the Stradivari name. I mean, he's always been a very famous and renowned master, but we want to bring it more into the mainstream. We want to equate his name with being, Picasso. For someone who was living in the 17th, 18th century, he was incredibly prolific. He made about 1,100 instruments, only 600 of which survived. And then of those, 200 that are privately traded these days. But we want to bring it into the mainstream. We want to make his name synonymous with the perfectionist that he was, and do it in a way that's kind of cool. And so our company, we're not just the typical brokers in the sense that, someone's interested in a Strad, okay, here's a Strad, have fun with it. We'll never see you guys again after we make our commission. We're much more of like a turnkey solution where we will curate the experience of what it is to own a Strad and be part of what we call this, the Stradivari Club. The most expensive, the most exclusive club in history. We're...
That's trademark, by the way.
So, so if I purchase a violin from you guys, I've got my $10 million around, I get a Stradivari.
We get a chance to do that.
We get a chance to do that. We'll talk afterwards. But what does
AOL.
that mean, turnkey? So what is the difference between if someone's getting a violin from you guys?
So the first question we get is, okay, I'm interested in buying a Stradivari, maybe as like a fun investment, because they have been really appreciated since the first year that they've been around. They've always been an appreciating asset, no matter what else happens in any other market, which is really interesting. Someone comes up to us and says, okay, I buy this instrument, what do I do with the Strad?
I can't play.
I can't play it, I'm not a musician, I don't know how to store it, I don't know how to take care of it, so we provide all of those services. We maintain the instrument, we'll give them free private concerts, we have an orchestra that performs and uses the instrument, basically, under our care. So
for special performances at the Met Museum or Carnegie Hall, we'll be playing the Stradivaris, and I think it's kind of like it really is a turnkey solution in that we do maintain it. You have great insurers like Lloyd's of London, Lark Insurance, Total Dollar, a lot of great insurance companies that actually do have these under the coverages. So there's really little liability when you are buying an instrument.
The one interesting aspect of this that we like is that they're very much inconspicuous in the sense that if you have a very expensive diamond or watch or a jewelry piece, people can basically, tell the value. With instruments, they're less conspicuous or more discreet about it. So, but they also sound incredible, as you'll hear.
Yeah, most people think we're going to be on the streets, just playing for money out there.
Exactly.
So luckily, that's why it's very easy for us to get in and out.
It's
of
good to
places.
know if you get a violin, you also get these guys to come perform for you. So you get the 2-for-1. I do want to ask you a little about going around with the McDonald Stradivari. So were there bodyguards everywhere? This is an incredible instrument.
I think it's very difficult to steal a Strad. You could do it, but the people that you're going to sell it to are just they're basically very, very few who would actually
nobody would
that you have one. So I think that all those bodyguards and everything were just more for like the extra protection for the McDonald. But I think an instrument like that is just so it's warranted to get the absolute utmost care, as you would a diamond that's 80+ million, or to think of a Picasso painting that just went for 178 or $9 million. I mean, just what kind of security you need around that. But again, these instruments have just withstood so much the test of time. I mean, in 300 years. So I think Yeah,
I mean, the previous owner, the McDonald, before the current owner inherited it, their father was Peter Shidlov. He was the violist of the Amadeus String Quartet. So he would use it all the time in the viola. He just took exceptional care. He knew the value was, even then in the 60s and 70s, was very valuable. But even if David is playing on his viola, it could be worth upwards of $1 million or $45 million. It doesn't, in the end, it doesn't matter, because all of these things are so rare, exceptionally rare, that we take the utmost care of
They're really priceless objects, and it's very hard to say a price. I mean, the only reason we know prices is because of other instruments that have sold that were pretty much the same year as this one or that one, and
based on comps.
You have a lot of comps, and that's kind of what you base a lot of these prices on. For the McDonald's, it's a very exceptional case because there's literally only one instrument that could ever be on the market. And the other 9 are in the museum, so they can never be sold. And there's 2 in foundations, so they don't want to sell these instruments. So I think for us, the hardest part is actually getting access to these instruments, or actually getting them on the market, because it's actually not very difficult to sell a Stradivarius, if you would believe. It's more of just finding the access to one that's at a good price, and someone is willing to sell it, because you could have the top soloists in the world who do play on their own Stradivarius. There's an emotional aspect. So right now, if you said, I have a blank check for you for my viola to buy, I would just say absolutely not. I would not sell this viola for any amount, because there is kind of this intangible quality. It really is, the sound, or of your voice, or this viola is really my soulmate, I guess. And that, if you could just put it that way.
When you start having a relationship or getting married, you may have to change that answer. My wife is sitting here. She's my soulmate.
Yeah, sorry about that, but it just. Yeah, I think my wife.
Dave's going to get very metaphysical.
Yes.
Very metaphysical.
It's going to be very difficult, yeah. But I think it's more of that kind of angle that we take, when we were looking at these instruments. So for that kind of aspect, to get a person to say, yes, I will sell my Stradivarius, even if we offer them $7 or $10 million, it's extremely difficult just for them to part with it at that point.
Awesome. Well, I think we're going to take some Q&A from the crowd right now. So we got our mics going out there.
Don't be shy.
What do you guys have coming up right now while they're finding? If people want to check out where you'll be performing next?
So actually, in a week, I'll be in Verbier, Switzerland. Sorry, you're gonna have to take a plane. But it's in the Swiss Alps. It's a festival, the Verbier Festival, and I'll be playing a few concerts there, as well as after we go to Italy and.
We'll be playing a few concerts in the Hamptons. We have a festival out in East Hampton every summer, so we have about 3 concerts that we post on our website, salomechamber.org. And then after that, back in New York, we have a couple of cool things coming up in October, including a concert at the Metropolitan Museum. So we're playing at the Grace Rainey Rogers Auditorium. David's going to be our soloist, and the whole orchestra is going to be performing. So.
And I'll be introducing you guys.
And you'll be introducing us.
I tell them I'll be their hype man. So, we've got a question over here.
What is your guys' favorite and least favorite thing about working with your siblings?
Oh, good question.
It's a good question. Sean, do you want to take that one?
Dangerous question.
We're passing the
we
buck.
get to, there's definitely no excuses for not seeing them on a constant basis. But I guess the good thing is that we all have different strengths, and we have different areas of expertise in what we do, and I think we respect each other for those qualities. And it's every day is completely different with our company, with our business, with our performances, our concerts. So it's really the beauty, I think, of being an entrepreneur, doing your own company, is really to expect the unexpected and being able to handle situations where you just have to kind of basically improvise. And we learned that from playing, because playing violin and going on stage, nothing ever is exactly right. It's kind of like if you're in the sport, you're always improvising. Something always is different.
Something always goes wrong somewhere.
Yeah, everything always goes wrong. So basically, as a performer and also in business, you always have to look for the unexpected and always keep ahead of the curve, to see what's happening in the markets, what's happening in everything. And I think that for us is what we hope other performers, other musicians, kind of learn from that part, and also to to be entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I mean, I think in our business, in our world, it's very difficult to say that, we're musicians, we're performers, we're soloists, we play with major orchestras around the world, and have a business on the side that is, deals with, millions of dollars worth of instruments. And, we've, in our career for the last 5.5 years, we've sold around over 20 Stradivari violins, and kind of are trying to lead this market in this, into the 21st century to make it a little bit more accessible to new buyers and people who would otherwise be very afraid of getting into this market.
Yeah, we actually last year sold a violin. We sold a Strad for Bitcoin. So someone had a lot of money in Bitcoin and wanted to trade out of it right before, the price of Bitcoin, crashed. And this year we're working on partnerships with Visa, Amex, Discover, and Palladium, JP Morgan Palladium, to actually sell violins using credit cards. So someone not only can get an appreciating asset, they can also get 5+ million points to use at their leisure.
Nice.
That's a lot of trips, by the way. So
I see another question out there.
So just to continue with this line, how did you come up with this, innovative business model of using
I
your
think it has
musical expertise to facilitate investment in these amazing instruments?
That's a great question. So we call Sean as our resident expert. He's been studying violin since he was about 10 years old. So literally,
it was a hobby / obsession that became into a profession.
He would have posters of violins on his wall instead of cars or girls. It would be.
I would have those.
He had violins, you had girls.
And so he's our resident expert, so he can actually see an instrument. Doesn't even have to be a Strad, an instrument 20 feet away, and he can say, "Oh, that's an incredible, Storioni or Kappa," and we're just kind of floored. I actually worked for after we all went to Princeton to study political science. After college, I worked for Google, which I know is kind of heretical to say in this building, but I worked for Google in marketing, and so I'm kind of like the no pun intended strategy person.
She's the head of our operations.
I'm the
Head of our operations. Each sibling has a role here.
Each sibling has a role, and then David is our he's the world famous, if not the best, viola soloist in the world. He has relationships with the owners of these instruments, people who perform with him. They see him as an incredible musician and someone that they trust to be a good guardian and a good curator of the custodian of the instrument moving forward. So
Awesome. We got another question right there.
Hi. What is one of your most favorite pieces or songs to play?
Oh.
That's a great transition as well, I think, as well.
Recently we've been commissioning our resident composers. So we have two this last year, Alexei Shore and Iran Eldor. So, and they've been writing some of the greatest works. I think they've written over 50 works for us, for our orchestra. For me as a soloist with the orchestra and the three of us. So we'll actually be playing a few of those pieces this year, but tonight. But the funny thing is, every year when last year I played with the National Symphony Orchestra, the Schnittke Viola Concerto. So at that moment, I was practicing it pretty much every day. It was a 45-minute piece that I had to memorize, with the orchestra in Carnegie Hall. So it was a really, really big, momentous. So I think anytime you have something really, really big, you basically hone in onto that piece, and then
that becomes your favorite piece.
That becomes your favorite piece.
It's basically like an actor, right? And you're working on a film for 2 years, right? So you become that person, right? So if you're playing a Schubert quintet, that for me is one of my favorite pieces. But if you're working on it and you're doing concerts with it, then it obviously becomes a lot more personal at that moment. But yeah, I mean, we love classical works.
We love tango music. We play a lot of Piazzolla, actually. He's the tango king, and we're actually going to be coming out with our first, David's 5th recording, but on Warner Classics. We're about to sign a contract with them.
I don't know if you're supposed to say that right now, but sorry about that, Warner. But we're very
We'll edit that out.
Very, very. I think it's today or tomorrow.
Today or tomorrow, but it's Vivaldi's Four Seasons, which everyone loves, and then Piazzolla's Four Seasons. So he wrote the Buenos Aires Four
not
Seasons.
on the violin, on the viola.
On the viola.
So
and then Alexei Shore also wrote a Four Seasons, so it's the 12-season CD that we're going to come out with. So we kind of like to shake it up, or else you just kind of get bored of whatever it is if you concentrate too much on one particular genre.
Awesome.
music.
Got our guy right here.
Hello.
Hey.
I really appreciate your expertise on all this, and I was wondering, just going back, you mentioned that you started at 5 years old. Was there ever a point? I mean, I assume you came into it organically, but you ever thought that maybe you didn't want to be so committed, and you might?
Yeah, that's a great question. So
You know-
we actually didn't know we were going to do anything in music. I mean, I was when I was 8, 9, 10 years old playing ice hockey and tennis and other sports, and David was
Actually, with Sarah
played
Hughes' brothers.
Yeah, we used to go carpooling with Sarah Hughes and the pretty
from
much
the
every
same
day,
town
just-
in Great Neck, Long Island. David, he played basketball, and we were very active with sports in
And
school.
academics as well. I
Academics,
think
yeah.
music was always kind of a hobby, and we still consider it to be a professional hobby of sorts. When we went to college, we all went to a liberal arts school, and we all studied political science. And Sean went on to getting his MPhil at Cambridge University. So music has always kind of been, I don't want to say tangential, but it's always kind of been core to who we are and what we do as a family. I think that's kind of what brought us all together.
And also to kind of dispel this myth of, as a musician, you only have one thing to focus on, and that should be your only focus. And for us, we couldn't only lock ourselves up into a practice room and play 4 to 6 hours a day and say we're going to become musicians, we're going to become a soloist. For us, it was more like that was one part of a very long journey in which we wanted to change it up, to do different things, and never.
The classical music industry is really having a secular change, just like other industries right now, and generally the whole music industry, but especially the classical music. And I think for future musicians to really find success in what they're doing, they have to look beyond the practice room. They have to look beyond, just kind of locking the door and just practicing, incessantly for 6, 7, 8 hours a day. So with us, yeah, I mean, we obviously we pay our dues, and we do practice, but at the same time, it's how you utilize the instrument and in what regard.
Yeah, we wish more conservatories or universities would have a program to tell a lot of musicians. I mean, a lot of musicians that ask me for advice or what am I doing, I always tell them to have something to fall back on, because just going into this music business, I mean, as someone who has done it, who goes around the world playing with major orchestras, solos, as if I were just doing that and that was just my whole life, I could see having a lot of getting a lot of satisfaction out of it, but you're kind of missing something else. And I think also to make a living off of doing that, even at the very highest level, it's tough. It's really
Well,
really
it's
difficult.
kind of what, Tim, you're doing with fencing in schools right now, and kind of bringing a certain entrepreneurialism to an Olympic sport that should be more mainstream. I mean, you've carved out a niche, and you're exploring that, and you're having a lot of success.
Yeah, and the
that.
poster child for that whole sport, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I think we've talked before about how difficult it is for musicians now. It's really, I think some Olympic athletes, you're doing it because you love it, but it's definitely, it's not enough for most people to make a living on as well. So you really are pursuing a passion. So we got a question in the back.
Yeah.
Being a former violinist myself when I was younger, and knowing that you're doing this professionally and done this for so many years, do you find that you still need to practice as much, or is it just for new pieces, or you're just like, nah, I got this, I'm good?
If we have an important concert coming up in a Carnegie or even lesser venues, we have to kind of sit down
You have to clock in the hours. But as long as you're consistent, I think, for us growing up, I mean, I speak for myself and Sean, like practicing 45 minutes to an hour a day was considered a lot, but as long as you did it consistently, you didn't really have to,
And also there are a lot of times where you wouldn't have access to actually play the violin or practice it, or if you're on the plane and you have to look over a score and start to mark, just to learn the piece and to hear it and to notate certain things on it. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of practice that can go into it without actually
But
playing.
I will say that playing on instruments of this caliber definitely makes practicing a lot more fun.
Exactly.
And interesting.
definitely
It's like
true,
every day it's a different instrument. Okay, eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
It can be addictive.
Exactly.
Playing on this.
Awesome. Well, I think now we're going to send you guys backstage to get ready, to get the stage ready for you guys to perform. So I want to thank
guys
you. It's
ready
been
for this?
awesome with the questions.
Thank you.